Things that were once the subject, topic, or contents of sci-fi movies are becoming a reality, or soon will be. And a lot of this seems to be down to AI and related technologies. So what does that mean for sci-fi films in the future? What will they be about? I have notes, so you'll see me referencing them from time to time, so I don't forget things, basically. I think sci-fi movies will still exist. I think they'll just have a different focus. And I think it'll be less about emerging technologies or possible future technologies or dreams of future technologies, and more about societal impacts. What did I write here? Philosophical, ethical, and societal consequences of those technologies. And that kind of makes sense because we're at a stage where, films we used to watch and think, maybe these ideas are crazy, this will never happen, are happening. Even things like, you look at movies like 1984 and they, that sort of Big Brother element. And, I live in the UK and there's so much surveillance, and some of the technologies they use in China and other places, it's just incredible. And more we're losing freedoms to protest or just gathering groups. I mean, there's been some infamous examples here in the UK, so it feels like we've moved from what was considered sci-fi is now more and more becoming the world we live in. So it's those philosophical and societal changes that I think we're grappling with right now. But to get a bit more specific about some ideas, I think it'll get more about the nature of what a robot is, or to choose one element, and how does that relationship work? What does it look like in the future? Do we want to be part human, part robot? Is that something that's going to happen in the future? I guess you could say in a way it's happening now with artificial body parts and growing things in the lab, human things, but they could be replaced by robotic things. So are we happy to become part human, part robot? Would we choose to go down that path individually if we were given that choice? Would we choose to be, if robots and artificial intelligence become sentient, would we choose to be a robot? If I could be sentient in a robot, in a mechanical, technical, I don't want to say being thing, is that something I would want to do if it meant, eternal life? All these sorts of questions, and there's so many things around what I've just said. You could go off on a tangent in every direction. think that's what the sci-fi movies of the future will be about. How we navigate those paths to those different things. And I think rather than be worried about the end of sci-fi, I think we just have to, as I said at the start, change our focus a little bit and come at it from a human side and how it affects us individually and as humans, as a species. Yeah. I covered about 4 of these notes just then. Yeah, how does that, if we do have artificial beings like robots as we have now, how does that relationship progress? What is that relationship? I mean, there's been some very interesting movies in recent years, Ex Machina, Her. Movies like that are addressing these things. And I think there'll be a lot more, because it'll be such a big part of society that there'll be a lot more things that go down, a lot more movies that are made that go down that path, because it's the world we live in. And with things like quantum reality, quantum computing, what does that mean for the path ahead? And there's been movies that look at this. I mean, who's really in control? What does that mean for us all? I mean, there's so many big questions that I think sci-fi can address in an entertaining and engaging way. That I don't know. I think there's endless possibilities. The interesting thing will be is if an ever-increasing Big Brother kind of world that we live in will allow those movies to have a voice. And that in itself could be a subject for a sci-fi movie. A bit like 1984, but a kind of where we're at now version of 1984 would be interesting. And movies like The Matrix and Black Mirror and all sorts of programs like that, they look at some of these issues and raise questions in an entertaining and engaging way. And there's no reason why we can't still do that. Yeah, merging with technologies, I mentioned that, genetic modification or enhancement or immortality. And if we go down that path, who gets upgrades, who doesn't? Is this only going to be for the rich? Oh, there's so many questions that movies can look at. And with all of that, and all the pros and cons, what does that mean for humanity? How do we define humanity as we move forward in this direction of more machine-led life? I think I'm jumping ahead, but there was a book that my brother put me onto years and years ago about the end of work, about how, I can't remember, it covered a lot of subjects, but it looked at things like, what are we all going to do when everything's automated and, we don't actually have to work in the traditional sense. And if AI and, computing keep going in the direction they are, we sort of, Homo sapiens, we kind of won't be needed at some point if things keep going in the direction they're going. So what do we do? So we should be thinking now about, and I know people are, about what does our life look like then? You know, there's no work, so we have to do something. Do we lead, you know, lives of leisure or leisure, depending where you are, and what does that look like? Will that be enough? I mean, we all sit around getting fat then. I don't know. So many questions to think about. And if we've got no work and AI and robots and cyborgs and whatever else comes in the future are running the show, why do they need us? Kind of a bit scary, isn't it? So, but assuming that we're somehow in control or we have a small group of people running the show, then we have to find something to do. And that's a big question, because when people end work, even if they slavishly do jobs that they don't want to do, which most people do live like that, then often when they finish work, they're at a loss and they go downhill. So we don't want that happening. You know, especially from a young age. You don't want to be going downhill from a young age. We need to create a world, an environment where we explore what no work looks like. And I hope that people are looking at this. But again, what an interesting subject for a movie. Post-work society. And of course, what's the ethics of all this, of AI and all its implications? You know, we're getting a lot of things coming up now with deep fakes and things like that. You know, someone could take my image and create anything they wanted, and it looks so real that people wouldn't know if it was really me or not. Well, people close to me would, but the rest of the world wouldn't. So I could get destroyed, and people's lives are getting destroyed by, you know, bad players. So again, more fodder. You know, there's quantum realm and multiverse. You know, as we move past traditional realms into quantum realms, like I mentioned earlier on, there'd be so many things for the imagination to explore there. As we learn more and more about space and, you know, other galaxies or our place in the bigger picture. I mean, I'm one of those people that thinks, given the knowledge we have now of so many galaxies, and we're such a tiny little pinprick in this whole system, why there wouldn't be other life forms. I mean, it seems, I don't know, obvious might be too strong, but it seems to make sense there'd be other life forms somewhere else where conditions were right. That doesn't mean they're going to look like us, but, you know, they're not going to look like the green aliens from the moon that were in those early films, but they may come in a completely different form, and it might be connected with quantum realms So, we don't, again, I just feel like there's so much fodder there for people, especially filmmakers who are passionate about sci-fi, passionate about science, that they could make so many great movies. And I've written here that I think the technologies like AI and quantum and all the rest of them around there, computing, cyborgs, whatever you want to talk about, I think they will become the settings. A bit like I said at the start, they'll become the settings of sci-fi movies, and the drama will be found in the human response to that. So there'll be human stories, and sci-fi always are human stories, but even more so, I think, as some of those technologies from the past are a reality, I think it will become even more about that. And sci-fi, I think, will keep doing what it always does. And I think that is that it will use the future to explore the present. Thanks for watching. It'd be great if you could like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. This is such a big topic and so many tangents you could go on. But I think there's going to be even more sci-fi movies, so I have no fear of the end of sci-fi movies. I hope to see you in the next one.